Is Rhinette? That's absolutely fine. Okay. Well, it's 6:32, so I figure we should get underway. Let's begin with a word of prayer. Gracious and holy God, we give you thanks for this time together to learn more about the possibilities in a Keystone conference. We pray for your spirit of discernment and wisdom to be in this group, that we may hear what is being offered, raise our questions, and have conversation about what might be possible in the future. And we pray all of this in Jesus' name. Amen. So, the document was set out in advance of people of the table. Did everybody receive that? Uh-oh, I see Amelia shaking her head. Did some of you receive it? Okay. Well, at least some people received it. That's what we want to see. We can make sure that that gets bulleted to you. If you did not receive it, you can put your name or your email address in the chat, and we'll make sure that we get it to you. Okay. So there are two things, or well, three, but one of them is very short. There are two main things that we're going to talk about tonight. The first is the timeline that we have for Keystone process. And then the second is the mission focus, the people at the table. And if we've got a slide, Nora, do we have a slide of the timeline?
I don't have that with me. I didn't know I was supposed to have PowerPoint tonight.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. I think I can bring it up pretty quickly. Just hold on a second. And some of you have seen the timeline information previously, so it will not be new to some of you, but just want to make sure that we cover everyone. So if there are people who have not seen it, we want to make sure that that's available. Okay. Share screen. This document, you see my whole desktop? Yeah.
I only see the document.
Oh, okay. All right. So this document is our project transition timeline. And the purpose of it is to show how things would happen. A lot of this obviously depends on the vote that's happening on November 9th. And some of these items are already in process, but I want to go through it quickly so that you have a sense of what's happening. We had our joint spring meeting in June. The training to build relationships, scaffolding for committees on ministry and associations, that is work that's already started with Bonnie Bates and also with Nora and Kevin McLemore. And you'll see more of that in the third and final town hall, which is about associations. And that's where a lot of that information comes up. The transition information has been added to the draft bylaws. That's been completed. What that means is that if the vote is positive, then in the spring, at each of the spring meetings of the four conferences, there would be a vote on a new constitution and bylaws. And that constitution and bylaws now includes instructions for how the transition would happen in terms of staffing, because I know that's the major concern that a lot of people have. The staffing and finance drafts have been reworked for the town halls. That was the first town hall meeting. The reservation of our name now has to happen in March because it's got to be 180 days out. It can't be, or 120, it can't be any sooner than that. We are in the process of holding the town halls, the forums, etc. And we lead up to November 9th when each conference votes at 11:30 on the motion. And remember that there's another vote that happens earlier that week that's probably more important, has a major influence on our lives. So keep that in mind. Make sure you vote on Tuesday, but then you show up again to vote on Saturday. If the vote is successful, one of the first things that happens is that personnel policies are created so that we can then start hiring new staff or preparing for transitional staff. The formal motion to General Synod is submitted. That has to be in by the end of November. And like I said, the next big thing is spring meetings where we would vote on a new constitution and bylaws, and there will be lots of conversation before that would happen. In fact, we currently have the working group and the conference minister leaders have a draft of a new constitution and bylaws. So that has been in process for a while, working on that very hard. So then we have a little bit of a quiet time because in July is when Synod happens in Kansas City. And we have the vote on the motion. And on November 9th, we're voting on a motion for merger. Once we determine which way that's going to go, if it passes, it goes on and all of Synod will vote on it again in July because Synod has to approve it. And it's a different kind of vote from the way that Southern New England did it. We will not have any debate or anything from the floor. It's a different type of action of Synod. It's different from what Southern New England did, for those of you who were present for that back then. And following Synod, this will be the completion of the Keystone working group's work. That will happen in the fall of 2025. Penn Northeast would start its process of moving from a conference to an association, which will be an interesting transition for them. Probably not always an easy one. And also in the summer, right after our spring meetings, we would start working on a transitional Keystone Conference board, using members from each of the current conference boards to put in place. So we have a transitional board that would choose their officers. And then work begins immediately on the job description for a transitional conference minister. And a transitional conference minister would be hired or contracted. This would not be a called position. So it is something that the board can work on. When it comes time for a settled executive conference minister, that will have to be a national search. So the settled positions are when we do open search. So for the transitional piece, it can be done through an action of the board. So we start putting that new transitional board and officers plan into process, into place. And then the 4 Pennsylvania conferences become the historic conferences, and they retain a skeletal board. And the reason for that is because finances are such in each one that as we talk about a combination of finances over time, that takes a long time. And there are a lot of aspects to each of our financial situations, like endowed funds, that have to be dealt with from each conference. And just FYI, that's what's happened in Southern New England, is that Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island retain a skeletal board so that they can watch over what's happening with the money and where things are going. We will have a transitional regional conference ministers. We might think about changing that name to regional ministers, because I know that some people have said they feel very confused by that. Regional conference minister, is that, what is that? So it might be regional ministers. And then also transitional admins. And these are likely to be people who are already in positions now, will move into transitional positions as well. And they will all be eligible for the called position. Anybody who's in a transitional position will be eligible for the called position. That's why they're not interims, and they are transitional. Once we get into that, in the beginning of 2026 is when the transitional conference board creates the job description for settled executive conference minister. Then in spring of 2026 would be the first Keystone Conference annual meeting. And there's already been some conversation about where that would be. And it looks like it's something that may move perhaps from State College to Harrisburg. That remains to be seen. And so we go forward with the executive conference minister search, because that has to happen first before the settled regional ministers are chosen and the settled admins. So that is right now our general timeline that we're looking at, and it's being massaged as we go along, because right now anyway, it's hard to do anything or put anything in really in stone until we get to November 9th and after November 9th. So are there any questions right now about the timeline? Anything that's confusing or unclear? Okay. Stop the share on that one. So it looks like, I'm assuming that most of those comments in the chat have to do with who has not received the people at the table document. Is that right? Okay.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So one of the things that the Keystone Working Group was looking at all along is what is something that the Keystone Conference and all of the people in it across the Commonwealth could do that would benefit the entire Commonwealth, so that we're talking about an actual influence that we could have all together. That would be a buy-in. Everybody could buy into it. They could see themselves in it, be connected to it. And a subgroup of the working group put together a proposal called People of the Table. And this is for celebrating and energizing ministries that end hunger. So it's possible that that would be, and likely if people agree to it, that would be a mission focus. Now, the reason this is chosen, and to focus on hunger in particular, is because, one, the majority of our churches, like vast majority of our churches, are already connected to some type of food ministry. So they may be from just collecting cans, not just, but collecting cans for the food bank, to hosting community meals. I heard from one of the churches this past weekend, very small church in a very small village setting, that gave out 88 meals last week at their community meal. And that type of thing, where churches are already connected to that, or they're working on advocacy about food deserts. There is a widespread issue of hunger in Pennsylvania. Interestingly enough, it's largely concentrated in rural areas. In our urban areas, it, not surprisingly, breaks down by race and ethnicity. In Philadelphia, for example, about 25% of all children are suffering from food insecurity. And for the general population of Philadelphia, it's about 11%, but it starts to go much higher for African Americans and Latinx people. So in the urban areas, it's what we would expect in terms of race and ethnicity, and very high for children. In the rural areas, it's high. Interestingly, 63% of the counties in the United States are rural. And when it comes to food insecurity, 87% of the counties with the highest rates of overall food insecurity are rural counties. So in Pennsylvania, that concentrates in the northern part of the state and the western part of the state. So that will not be a surprise to anybody who has ministry in those areas. So food insecurity is real in all parts of the Commonwealth. And we know the rates of free and reduced lunches at the schools in both rural and more metro areas. The working group says this. Our faith calls us to action, obviously. And by looking at an issue that all of our churches are already tapped into, it makes it relatively easy, or I should say pragmatic, to choose this issue as a beginning focus. So maybe for the first, excuse me, for the first 1 or 2 years of a new conference, this could be a focus. And we believe that it is absolutely biblically founded and grounded in feed my sheep. And Jesus saying, you know, I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. So there's a clear connection there. What the group said is this: we anticipate that the majority of the action around this focus will continue to happen within local churches and associations. Meanwhile, Keystone Conference staff and board committee leaders will play these roles. So this is going to be something that is shared by conference, association, and local churches. The conference would cheerlead, obviously. That is, be a collector of stories, share things on social media, getting the word out, trying to get some connections in Harrisburg, talking with the Secretary of Agriculture, for example, who actually goes to one of our churches. I can't remember which one it is now, but attends one of our churches. Offering resources to help make connections beyond just a local food bank. We've got some amazing organizations in Pennsylvania. There is Hunger Free Pennsylvania. There's obviously the UCC Office for Advocacy. There is Phil Abundance in Philadelphia. It's working on hunger insecurity issues. And we would like to try to make the mission focus something that shows up all over in association meetings or in the conference meeting, even in ministeriums, where there's an element of hands-on action that can be done that relates to this theme. So that's what we're talking about in terms of mission. You know, Pennsylvania has over 7 million acres of farmland. They are historically very, very strong agriculturally. It makes sense that food be our focus as we start out as a new conference. So that's generally what the proposal is. It does not mean in any way that any of the other things that people are doing as passion projects wouldn't be acknowledged or resourced as we are able to. So I did have some people say previously to me, Why isn't O&A the mission focus, for example? O&A has a lot of support in each conference. There are working groups or teams, ministry teams focused on it, but it is not a topic that all of our churches or the vast majority of our churches are currently tied into. So we're trying to think about things that are really a lot of people deeply connected with that also make sense to our location. Education was another one that came up because there's a lot of work that needs to be done in education. But again, we do have churches that are involved in schools that are providing backpack ministries and things like that, but it wasn't something that fit all across the Commonwealth. So we settled on this one as our first launch. It won't be the only one, and we would hope that in years to come we have more and other mission focus that we could build on over time. So questions, comments, what do you all think about this? Does it make sense to you? Do you feel like it's something that people could gather around? I mean, the phrase people at the table is built on the idea of all of us as disciples gathering around the Eucharistic tables, but also gathering around tables when we're doing community meals and so forth. It has a nice ring to it. So thank you, Sean. Other comments? What do you all think?
This is Fa. I think food is something that everybody needs. So it certainly is a common thing that we should definitely work on. And there is a crisis about it. So I think we should do it.
Thank you, Fa. Amelia Price.
I think it's a fabulous idea. I completely resonate with the hunger issues that you described. You described to a T the little valley that we live in, even though where I'm sitting, we're surrounded by very, very productive fields. You've all probably eaten cantaloupe that came from within a mile of my house.
Yeah.
The only concern that I have is that individual communities and individual churches in those communities have individual needs.
Yes.
And the challenge with doing a top-down program is losing that individual connection. It's not impossible. It's not a deal breaker in any way. I just raised that trying to do a top-down feeding kind of program like this necessitates people on the ground who are familiar with the individual circumstances.
Well, and Amelia, we're not talking top down in this sense. What I think what the conference role is helping to facilitate bringing everybody, recognizing what everybody is already doing where they are, and seeing if there's ways that we can strengthen each other, work together more, and uplift what people are already doing.
We'll work together more through what's already happening rather than a new program.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, we can't do a new program, you know that.
That's why I raised the issue, because
yes.
it
you already know.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
So what we're thinking about is how do we get, for example, if we've got churches who are working with a local food bank, which is wonderful. Yes, the conference augments what's already happening, what Ken said there. We would like to be able to provide resources so that, for example, if a church is working with local food bank, and maybe they want to go further than that. Maybe they want to look into something internationally. Maybe they want to learn about heifer. Those are the kinds of things that we hope that we could do and then lift up. I personally want stories. I want stories from churches who are doing this work, because I hear astonishing stories when I visit places about what kind of food ministry is happening and what a difference it makes to people. And lifting those up and letting other people in the conference see them, the role of social media comes in here. It's very, very, very important to what would happen in terms of a mission focus, because we have to get words out about it.
Thank you.
Yeah, Dwight, thank you for that. The UCC's Three Great Loves were, oh, Patty. Go ahead, Patty.
You remember some years ago, we did a sort of a national thing where
Yes.
we kept track of how like every church reported it was a certain day where we brought our did a food collection, kind of like Super Bowl Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if who's ever participated in that, where you sort of, you know, yes, we're all going to do the things that we've done, and hopefully connect to some other things. But it would be kind of really exciting to say across the state we collected
Yes.
X pounds, bags, however you want to say. I think that would be a really fun,
I do too.
fun thing.
Absolutely. I do
Yeah,
too.
So yes, I think it's great. Great idea.
that's exactly what we were talking about, Patty, and the subgroup that talked about this and formulated this was to amplify things local congregations are already doing and sharing those stories, and then we might be able to latch onto them for our church or our association and build upon that. And then together, these 500 congregations are actually having an impact in making a difference, all the way from the local level to lobbying our Congress people about what they could be doing in DC or in Harrisburg. So it's taking what we're doing. We just want to build upon it and then rally around that as a new conference.
Thank you, Dwight. I should have passed it to you long ago so that you can say all those things. Other comments, questions, thoughts?
Yeah, this is Dave
Hi,
Bushnell,
Dave.
and I think I think the food issue is a huge issue, which is it would be and I think that's good. So it's a conduit for lots of different things. I mean, the Farm Bill just lapsed today at a national level. That's a huge implication for food. Would you envision then at conference meetings, for example, like at the annual conference meeting, that workshops would have more of a focus around this issue, so that
Yes.
it would be a huge kind of learning time for that?
Yes, absolutely. And it goes, I mean, it goes from churches that want to start community gardens, or they just want to start their own garden. Um, that's been a movement that some churches have really latched onto. It can go into, and you know this, Dave, it can go into creation care in terms of agricultural production and how it's done. That's an issue right now with the Chesapeake for Lancaster County. So there's for farmers in Lancaster County. So there's all different ways to access this, because there's justice and advocacy issues that are part of it. And there's also, it goes from charity to solidarity, and it has the potential for full action to more, well, charitable action. And charitable action is still necessary. We've got to have food in the food banks for people. So people bringing cans of food is a really good thing. We also, a lot of people want to engage in that more advocacy justice work. And this is a great topic for it because it's present in many communities. There's already groups working with this that we can make connections with. Yes, absolutely, John. The answer to your question is yes, absolutely. Nora?
I think John was asking, would we be pointing toward local organizations or to national organizations for, I think that I'm reading that question correctly. And I think local is,
Yes, I would think that we would start local because we want to know what those are. Because nobody wants to step on anybody's toes and we want to lift up what's already happening locally. Absolutely. And then Commonwealth wide, because there's a number of really excellent Pennsylvania organizations already doing a lot of this work and overseeing this work in different parts of the state. And there's always national and international organizations that we can help point to if churches are interested in that in particular. But we're hoping that we might actually be able to make an impact in Pennsylvania. I mean, I envision that we could actually have recognition of some of these things and hold it up. If we have a common mission focus, we really can work together. I mean, everybody knows that in their heads, but the truth is that if you have a common mission focus, it tends to overcome your various divisions between you based on social or political issues. And I would really like to see us model some of that. That would be my personal dream. Yes, Dennis, absolutely. The meal programs I find really fascinating. And some people have huge ones and some people have small ones, or they hand out boxed meals versus a sit-down meal. I mean, there's all different kinds of ways that people are gathering at the table. We need to hear what those are. Joy, you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you covered it all. In terms of John's question, when we were having the discussions, we realized that there are such strong regional advocacy groups already in place for this that we thought if there is a congregation that is not doing something like this, it'll be an easy connection to make. And we also envisioned on our website of starting to list those places that are doing things like meals and doing, maybe they have a food bank or maybe they have a backpack program, all of those things, so that if a local church wants to start it, they can make that connection and reach out to that. And hopefully it's across former conferences, and all of a sudden we're making those connections. So we see this as a great web of mission that we're trying to put in place and make renew, strengthen connections that are already there and make new ones.
Mission web. I like that. Mike Gibbs or Heather, anything you'd like to add? I can't see Heather, so I don't know what she's doing.
I'm just listening to you, Carrie.
Is there anything you want to add as a member of the Keystone Working Group?
No, you did a great job. Thank you.
See, if I call on you, you come back to the first screen, so
I know, so you can see my smiling face.
Yeah, absolutely. Mike Gibbs, anything you want to add in on that?
The only thought I had is in forming partnerships. I think that the potential is there that if a congregation doesn't have the wherewithal to actually begin a food ministry, they might very well be able to partner with another congregation and provide help, manpower or person power to actually do things. I know in one of our food ministries at Mount Zion, we sometimes struggle getting people to actually show up to serve something that we do. And if we had another congregation that would be willing to partner in that particular ministry, provide the helping hands, they're not really creating something, but they are helping. And so being open to those kinds of partnerships would be another potential outcome of this.
I think that's great. I hadn't thought of that, Mike, and that's a great idea. It's easy. It's easy conceptually. I know that it's more difficult pragmatically to get people engaged like that. But I think it's a great idea.
So, Carrie, this is
Yes,
Dave
Dave.
Bushnell again. As I reflect back on the budget hearing, there weren't a whole lot of dollars in the budget. And when you focus in on a particular issue like this, and my question is, how open would the new conference be to some kind of offering that would give some resources for people outside of, let's say, the endowment fund options, and is that, and how will that impact offerings like the to the larger church offerings?
Yep.
Because I would think that you really can't forward a single issue. You can't forward anything without resources, financial
Yes.
resources.
You're
Yeah.
absolutely right. That's a really good point. And it's something that we'd have to talk about um, carefully, because I know that churches already have, if they do the national offerings, they have those. Then they also have local offerings that they do for missions they're already engaged in. So this would be an additional thing. We have to talk about how that would happen, when it would happen, how we recognize that it's happening, what kind of resources can we provide to help make it happen. But I think that's a very legitimate idea. Absolutely. And you're right. I need resources for that. Dennis?
There we go. I think that one of the roles of the conference in all of this is probably more of a publicity and
Yes.
providing an overall theme for the associations and the local churches
Yes.
to tag onto. And that wouldn't take as much in the way of resources to provide that kind of support.
Yes. And also, as I'm thinking, like when Dave mentioned having some resources, I'm thinking too of speakers and workshop leaders, because the other thing that we talked about doing was having Zoom workshops and speakers available for people at any time that want to talk about, I'm back to community garden, but a church garden. We'd want to get some really good speakers. We always need to pay some speakers when they come. Just even that kind of funding is important. But I could see associations rallying around this. And I really like that idea. Thank you, Dennis. Other thoughts? Laura, anything from your crew over there? Yes, yeah, I made you get up.
You're helping me get my steps in. That's okay. Actually, no, these guys were saying how much they really appreciate that.
You'll have to come forward, Laura. Sorry.
Yeah. Sylvia Crew was saying that this is something we can definitely get behind. Our Northeastern School District is one of the lowest income, and there's a lot of issues with children getting massive bills at school for because they can't pay. And we house the Northeastern Food Pantry here at the church, for the school district. And we were serving about 300 people a month. And there's also a lot of low-income seniors that live in this area.
Absolutely.
So definitely something, and we've actually brainstormed even a few more ideas while we were sitting here and working with some of our local UCC church is close to us, but maybe there's some things we could do there. So, yeah. Anything else you guys wanted to add? Pretty much, yeah, pretty much. And we've got a good number of farmers also in our congregation. So, yeah, and they're very passionate. I know Miss Donna, she's very passionate about beef. I mean, we often think about just produce, but also, maybe we have some folks, who actually could provide meat and things like that. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, but very much something we can get behind here. Thank you for asking.
Thanks, Laura, for that. Fi, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I'm serving as a chaplain now and not in a particular congregation. And so I was thinking about what we might be able to do. So I was texting with Patty, and we'll need to talk about it a little bit more. But I was thinking, since we wouldn't actually be able to go do, farm work or anything like that, or maybe probably even raise money, but we could perhaps ask our folks if they wanted to sign a postcard, a nonpartisan postcard, just encouraging our civic and state leaders to support food programs that already exist.
Yeah, and I think that a conversation with the Secretary of Agriculture would be key for that, in terms of what are some of the pressing things that he thinks are justice issues right now around food in the Commonwealth. And he's very good, so I would think that would be a place to start. Heather Kurtz?
So I know. So one of the things that, and I know every association cannot possibly do this, but I know in the Gettysburg Association, we have some extra money around mission. So one of the things that we have been doing is any church that does a mission, they can get a grant from our association to help them with a mission. So this just gave me another idea that if a local church is doing something around food, right, and they're collecting food, or they want to feed children, anything around food, then maybe that becomes the grant to make it not just local with local churches doing it, but that's one way on association level we can also contribute. So
that's excellent.
Yeah.
And I know that there are associations, and in Penn West, I know there are funds for granting, and hopefully can make good use of those that would support the mission.
And I think that the other opportunity it gives us is that as an association, it's kind of neat to see what local churches are doing then.
Yes.
Right? It's a neat way to connect to the local church and to stay in contact with the association and be supportive.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Wonderful. Thank you for your comments and so forth. Let me just give you a quick update in terms of our remaining town halls. There's a series of 3, remember, and this is our second. And our last one is about associations and what happens with associations, what doesn't happen, what are the expectations for associations, and what are the expectations associations have for a conference. This will not be as critical for Penn Northeast, since they are a conference acting as an association, but it will be, I know, very important for those of us in Penn Central and in Penn Southeast. Penn West associations, for those of you who don't know, are working very hard to they want Penn West to be a conference acting as an association. So that's the route they're going. They're pulling all their associations together, and their associations have said, yes, we're absolutely ready to do that. So in Penn Central, that there have been some comments and some ideas and a little bit of outreach among a couple of associations to talk about doing some of that shared ministry, but it's slow going in Penn Central anyway. That's okay. Associations are able to do what they will, when they want, as they will. The conference is not ever going to be able to tell them to do anything different, nor will we. So that'll be the third one. And ours is, what did we say it was, Nora? We had them all listed out.
Is it the 23rd?
Yeah, I think it's the 23rd, and it's different because it's in the afternoon. So it's not in the evening. 3 o'clock? Larry, is that what you're, okay. So it's at 3 o'clock on the 23rd.
Yeah. Yeah. Isn't it the 24th? No.
Somebody from the staff really should be able to answer.
Actually,
I just need to pull up my calendar.
It's definitely the 23rd.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that because I have to change it on my calendar.
Yes, Wednesday the 23rd at 3 p.m. A comment in response to something that I've received is that the other mission projects that are happening around the Commonwealth in the other conferences, let me be clear that we will assist in bringing all of those different ministries together so that they can communicate with each other. So that, for example, ONA in Penn Central can have conversations with ONA in Penn Northeast, and all of those pieces can come together. We want anybody who's engaged in a mission, project, or passion to be able to find their counterparts elsewhere and learn about how other people are doing the same mission work elsewhere. And so that is something we're going to facilitate. It's not like it's going to be, okay, it's all about food and nothing else. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. We have a strong creation care team. We want to find out who the other creation care teams are in the other conferences and try to get some of that communication. So the effect is the mission net, as Dwight was saying, that they were creating a mission net. And for now, for this beginning of Keystone, the focus would be on hunger and food, but that doesn't mean it always has to be. So our intent is for people to, yes, have connections and learn about the structures and ministries of what other people are doing around various mission projects. So don't think that this suddenly eclipses what everybody else is already doing. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Okay, so yes, ours is the 23rd. Penn West, no, Penn Northeast has one. I think they're first. Yep. Nora, can you unmute?
Yes.
Would you unmute? I think theirs is coming up next week, isn't it?
Penn Northeast is on the 10th.
Yes.
Penn, and then the rest of them are like all that same week of the 23rd. There's Penn West is on the 22nd. We're on the 23rd, and no, Penn West is on the 24th, and
Southeast.
No, Penn West
Southeast is the 15th.
Is on the 22nd, and Penn West number 3 is on the 24th. And then what Paul just said about Penn Southeast. Sorry, I knew there was 3 that same week.
Yeah, Penn Southeast is the 15th.
Yeah.
Okay. I apologize. The only reason I said the 24th is that here at Starby, we've been trying to provide something in the evening at the same time. And so not that we're, ditching the Penn Central, but
it's okay.
You're going to do 6:30 in the evenings. I'm sorry, that was my bad.
No worries. The talking points that happen at all 4 of the meetings having to do with associations will be the same. So feel free to go to another one. That's absolutely fine. Susan Emmons.
I was wondering, Carrie, we had a lot of good questions, I thought, at annual meeting.
Yes.
And I'm wondering what your sense is at this moment in time as far as people who have questions getting their questions answered.
So some of those questions that we had were answered in the first set. Well, there's been a couple of communications that have gone out to people who were at annual meeting. And some of the questions, which we combined all of them together, have been answered with the information from the first town hall. That was a huge one because there were lots of questions about staffing. So there are lots of questions about staffing. There were some, I was surprised there weren't more, but there were some comments about finances. I thought there'd be a lot more, but there weren't. The other question, though, that's come up over and over again, and I had a conversation with a woman this past weekend at one of the small churches, is about connection. And some of that's going to come up at in the association talking points. And I think that that's been spoken to, but I also know that it hasn't, there's still a lot of anxiety about connection and whether churches will still feel connected to the conference. So that's been a huge one that we've been working on and talking about, and I've been trying to talk about wherever I am. And a lot of the connection will depend on a commitment to being fully engaged. Because the churches, if they commit to let's put it this way, if your church is currently engaged with a conference, if you've got delegates coming to meetings, and if you're a clergy person, you show up at continuing education events and things like that, it's going to be the same for you. You'll remain connected. If you're currently disconnected completely from the conference, and we do have some churches that are really disconnected, that's going to be a lot harder. And one of the things I feel, Nora and I talked about this morning, feel compelled to do is find more time to be in churches in 2025, not necessarily preaching, but in churches, so that we can have those conversations about connection in person. And you'll be hearing a lot more about that. I don't want to say too much because where's Nora? There she is. We haven't made our plans and we haven't announced things yet, but we've been talking a lot about this, about the connections in the churches, with the churches, and also associations with their churches. That's a big one. And we'll talk about that when we do the associations town hall.
And I have a follow-up, and that is for those of us that are on the call, what would you like to see us doing as far as supporting the work of the Keystone Project?
I can tell you very clearly that for clergy who are present, who are serving a congregation, I would like you to tell your congregation about this. We have a number of churches that don't know anything about the Keystone idea. They're not even aware it's happening. And in some of those cases, their clergy do know it's happening. But I feel strongly about clergy as teachers, and I think we need to be teaching our congregations. I also want to encourage people to make sure that they've got delegates who are planning to attend and be part of the November meeting. I think that's really important.
Can I add, share the communications letter?
Yes, the communications letter, which comes out in email, it just came out. The most recent one just came out. To share that, to share the bulletin inserts that we've recently made available. It's getting the information out into the granular places. And that is really difficult to do. And it's not something the conference can do. It has to come from individuals and individual clergy.
Thank you.
Here's the other thing I want you to do, though. If you still have your doubts and your fears and so forth, I completely respect that. I would love to have a conversation with you. I had a conversation with a woman last week that was about how will Philadelphia, so if this becomes Keystone Conference, how would Philadelphia impact the rural areas? Or would rural churches be expected to somehow become something that they're not? And Philadelphia was mentioned specifically. And I affirmed for this woman that you will never be asked to be something that you're not. First of all, I wouldn't do that anyway, but second of all, we can't in the UCC. Nobody can tell you to be other than what you are as a congregation. There's a lot of insecurity about will we be forced to go in a different ideological direction? And that too is not possible for us to do, nor do we want any of our churches to do that. Pennsylvania has been a broad tent from the very beginning. It's known for that nationally, and I personally feel really proud of that, and that's the way it's going to stay, at least for now. So please reach out if you've got questions or concerns. There's still plenty of time. Have a conversation. There is the, Paul, can you put in the Keystone, I think it's Keystone Working Group at Gmail. Keystone Conference Project. Isn't that it? I have it here. That email is checked. I can guarantee that. And we want that to be a place where people send their questions. And if you want to, if there are things you want to say to me or to any of the other conference ministers that you don't want to say out loud in front of other people, which I would totally understand, then this is one of the ways. This is one of the ways to do it. Keystone Conference Project at Gmail. Keystone Conference Project at gmail.com. So if you've got anything, please reach out. Okay. Thank you, Paul. Any other general comments or questions?
Carrie, just one point. It's not just the clergy's role to share and educate. While you did highlight that, any lay people who are educated enough or even, want to just drag someone over to the pastor and say, hey, this person has no idea what this is about, and I'm kind of iffy on what's it about. Can we have a conversation?
Excellent.
Be the conduit for education.
Yes, and Gary, I appreciate that because I admit my bias, the clergy were on my mind for another reason. But you're absolutely right that it's very important for laity to be engaged in this as well. And I have been at churches where members of the council are familiar with Keystone, but other laity are not. So it's an important role for education to be done by anyone. Okay. Anything else? We are at 7:32. I'm sure you all want to be watching the debate at 9. Maybe. So we'll leave you to your evening. Thank you very, very much for being here. Blessings to all of you. So thank you, and please be in touch.